Hello everyone, what is up? It is me, Ewan from What Culture, joined as ever by the venerable Ben Roy Turner.
Hello there.
And the tenacious Scott Tailford.
Hi, I don't have a quote, but Star Wars.
Yes,
Good.
If you've been keeping up with the news, which you should be, because I imagine you're all well-informed individuals, you'll know that the Game of Thrones boys, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss,
I believe.
They're no longer involved with Star Wars, which is a bit of a shock. Maybe not if you've been keeping up with what they've been saying over the weekend and how they basically confirmed that they didn't know what they were doing.
It was weird, that.
I have no investment in the show whatsoever, but it's bad. Yeah,
I do, as a massive Game of Thrones fan. Well, who dropped off in the last season, it made all of it make sense.
Yeah.
But it weird, that.
Yeah.
Really weird how Frank they just admitted to
But I
everything.
thought, in the wake of this kind of discussion about them leaving the Star Wars saga, I thought it would be apt to take a look at what's going on with Star Wars in the future, because obviously Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, is bringing to an end not just the sequel trilogy, it's bringing to an end over 40 years worth of films, going back all the way to Star Wars in 1977. And this is the Skywalker saga, as we know it, coming to a close. And then after that, we've got Rian Johnson's planned trilogy, which he said, and I quote, "The new characters from a corner of the galaxy that Star Wars lore has never before explored. One story told over 3 movies. Go new places, meet new folks, come up with a new story to tell in the Star Wars universe. The sky's the limit."
Okay.
So basically what we're getting at here is that Star Wars, as we know it, is changing forever.
I hope it's a Bothan movie.
The Bothan spies.
Yes,
a lot
I
of them
wanna know.
died, didn't they? So
In terms of unused things, maybe that. I guess for Rian Johnson in general, looking at something like Knives Out, he's an incredible scriptwriter, and I think if you just give him full blank canvas, you can do whatever you want. I've always said that I would have loved what Last Jedi was if it was a separate thing, and I think that if you, like I said, you give him full creative control. Knives Out's being received extremely well, and just giving him the toy box that is Star Wars, I'd have to hope that he'll carve out its own little niche that could exist separately, but it'll end up getting comics and everything else as well as on top of that. I would assume.
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we're all big expanded universe aficionados, aren't we? Because we going back to the old canon as well as the new canon, I love both. But Star Wars has been exploring things beyond the Skywalkers for decades at this point. We've had the Knights of the Old Republic is probably the most famous, expanded universe material that has dared tread away from what we saw in the films, going I think it's set 3,000 years in the past before the events of Yavin or
it's more
something.
like 10?
10,000.
It's a long time,
Yeah, a
yeah.
long time ago. In a galaxy far, far away.
Yay.
And, I think the Knights of the Old Republic stuff is ripe for, reinterpretation going forward.
That was the biggest rumor that the Benioff and Weiss would take that, because it made sense
Well,
that the Game of Thrones guys
I guess
would
it
do that.
lends well to their wheelhouse in the way. I mean, I'm approaching this as someone who doesn't watch Game of Thrones,
Right.
but I imagine they would be down for the kind of the corrupt backstabbing and the moral ambiguous nature of the
Yeah.
Knights of the Old Republic. You think about the back and then you had the Mandalorian Wars, you had a corrupt Jedi Council in one place, and there was all sorts of great stories that emerged from that kind of era of Star Wars. And I'm curious to see, if we're talking about Rian Johnson going to a whole different era of the galaxy, that implies that it's not going to be Knights of the Old Republic. But we also know for a fact that Kevin Feige is working on a Star Wars movie as well, and he's approached a major actor to star in it. So there are all sorts of different avenues we could get from it. I don't know what you guys think. Do you want to see the Knights of the Republic come back in a way?
I almost feel like you have to do Knights of the Republic and something else that is far away from it all, because some of the best things about the expanded universe, which we're getting these days now, is that it's taking characters that we know and giving them more of an edge to them, like giving Count Dooku more of a credible backstory than rather being just someone that Palpatine went to, when he just had no one else, sort of like in between. But it's hard to do it now because obviously we've lost Christopher Lee, and you don't want to just recast all these live actors and characters just on a whim. So it's hard to it's hard to say some of my favorite things is revisiting these characters in a different way. So I feel like we're gonna have to go right off somewhere, or maybe get a character that isn't necessarily got their face on screen, sort of thing.
Yeah.
My thing, I want a clean break. And plus, you can go online and watch the Old Republic movies, the CG movies that they made. They're
By Blur
phenomenal.
Studios, yeah.
Yeah, they're absolutely phenomenal, and they prove which it was never in doubt, but that Star Wars as an ephemera, as a toy box, a series, a fiction, is so much fun.
It's just as heterogeneous as the Marvel universe or something.
Yes.
They're both self-sustaining universes that aren't just about the Avengers. And, if you're going to use that kind of allegory, you'd look at maybe how Marvel succeeds past there's more to the DC universe than Batman. There's more to the Marvel universe than the X and the Avengers. So in the same principle, you can apply that for Star Wars. But I will say, whereas with Marvel and DC, you've had had these entire expansive mythologies been going for, decades and decades and decades. With Star Wars, in the mainstream consciousness, that is still about Luke Skywalker, and it's still about Darth Vader, and it's still about everything. And, even though the sequel trilogy is different in its own way, it's still very familiar at the same time. And now my personal, not anxiety, because I'm excited to see new Star Wars movies and such, is how far away, the further you get away from the Skywalkers, how does Star Wars retain its own unique identity? I think Knights of the Old Republic, the games, they show that perfectly, but how do you translate that to film?
I think for the super mainstream, I think Jedi and or Sith or some sort of other dark force is integral to the series going forward. Like it will be there in the back. We'll have that in the Knights of the Republic stuff. But I'm kind of worried because we don't know if Daisy Ridley would do any more like films after this, and we don't know how Rise of Skywalker ends yet. But there's got to be kind of a way that they bring back the Jedi in some sort of order. I've always wanted to see on screen Luke on Yavin with his bunch of
He's
Jedi.
reliving his Jedi Academy fantasies again.
I need some sort. I think it needs some sort of new Jedi Academy, a new sort of maybe not massive order that controls everything in like Coruscant, but some sort of other order.
I think Ridley. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think they said that they would come back eventually, if years from now or something. But they didn't want to do anything immediately. But I think that makes sense if you were going to revisit this era. There's still so much that you can do with the period that we're seeing right now, and as has been tradition with Star Wars expanded stories for years as well. Any episode that has a period of time in between each episode is rife to have some sort of exploration.
Yeah, you'll plug something in. That was one of the rumors that they would eventually do an episode 10 with everybody returning after a good few years when we miss it again. But for me, one of the biggest things that Last Jedi does extremely well is proves that you can put these characters in the background and focus on the future and go forward. As much as Kylo's quote of letting the past die and whatever has been kind of gone back and forward as to where the franchise is right now. I really take that as a forward momentum. By the way that they start to go towards the end of that movie about them teaming up and a whole new order and whatever. It just proved that you can do Star Wars without a Skywalker, that he can be in the background. Yeah. So I like that as a forward step to doing more with the franchise and leaving Skywalkers behind. To me, that is the past.
Yeah, I completely agree. Are you going to sleep with me?
That's why I was going to say, that's why I want a Daisy Ridley to carry on, or I want a Mon Mothma type, so we can sort of have characters from this, what we've got now in this current trilogy, to carry on. Yeah. Because I feel like you can't just then do another hard break and carry on. We need some sort of...
You need a tether.
We need a tether, some sort of strands, not just C3PO and R2D2, because, at this point, they're so iconic and memorable, but they're so inconsequential now. Yeah. And we need something new going forward.
Yeah. The thing that I'm most anxious about, I love Star Wars. I'm so excited for pretty much everything that's coming out. I was even game for the Game of Thronesy things because it was the chance that maybe they were doing Knights of the Old Republic, and I really want to see that.
Yeah, that was what got me in.
But I do have a slight worry about the potential MCUification of Star Wars. Now, to me, Star Wars is a lovely event. It's a special event. It comes around every Christmas now, and it's a nice time for me to go back home, spend some time with my parents who introduced me to Star Wars. I can go watch the new film with them. It's a great thing, and it's not oversaturated. However, when Solo kind of came out in May, my anxiety there was that maybe Disney and via them Lucasfilm were getting a little bit carried away. They'd seen the success that they'd gotten from Rogue One as the little stopgap between Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and I feel as though they looked at that and they kind of their eyes lit up with money symbols, and they thought, well, okay, who's the most bankable Star Wars character from the original trilogy that can feasibly do a prequel on? Han Solo. Let's just put him in there, even though that story didn't have to be told. And for what it's worth, I do think Solo has its redeeming features.
It's a fine film,
but it was definitely unnecessary. Yeah. And it came out in May. And my worry there was that there was a plan for all sorts of anthology films. We've seen now that the Boba Fett film was basically killed and has been morphed into the Mandalorian somewhat. The Obi-Wan Disney Plus series was originally meant to be a film as well, but that got killed. And
it's basically now just a trilogy.
Yeah, exactly. And my worry is that with Feige coming in, even though he's had ludicrous success with Marvel, is that he tries to apply the same template. And I know the initial report from the Hollywood Reporter was literally just Kevin Feige is working on a Star Wars film. He's talked to a major actor about the role. My worry, even then, now that he's got all these responsibilities, is the big head of Marvel Entertainment, that he eventually looks at that, and Kathleen Kennedy looks at that and goes, well, maybe we want to have multiple Star Wars films a year.
The amount of different sort of big overarching companies that have tried to do the shared universe stuff. We saw Universal try and fail miserably. DC have obviously tried a little bit of it, and they keep going forward. DC seem to now be seeing the light and doing character focus pieces, which works. That's that's what I would rather they do with Star Wars. But like you said, it's interesting that Feige's the guy that they're tapping to bring in, because his known thing is he's the guy that mastered the shared universe, which is kind of what Star Wars has always been anyway. But for me, I'd rather they had a series of isolated stories going forward.
I think they go the Rogue One route and do events.
Plug stuff in.
I think actual events rather than specific characters might work best, because we did see some great characters out of that one, like Jyn Erso.
Yeah.
But for me, it was the whole tension of Rogue One, how it built up in like the atmosphere and how it just really made the Star Wars galaxy so much more grounded. Like when we were on Jeddah and you have the Star Destroyers up in the atmosphere, just there hovering over, just as you could feel like the grip that the Empire had over the galaxy. Like that really put it forward to me. Something I used to get from the expanded books and the games.
Yeah, the genius of Rogue One to me is that it makes you reappraise the entire original. It makes it puts a new hope into a completely different context. You finally understand the weight and the severity of the struggle that's going on, which makes it a vital piece of the Star Wars canon to my eyes. I look at Rogue One and like that story had to be told. Maybe it didn't, but to me, I look at that and I now can't look at the first Star Wars film in the same way.
I love how it made me rethink something like A New Hope. What do you guys think in terms of like because they obviously, like with Lucas departing, like you lose that sort of one sole visionary idea behind what Star Wars used to be. Do you think they need someone like that to helm it?
No, I don't. I think the thing that I like about Star Wars is that it is so, to me, it's kind of like, to use a really odd comparison, because I've got Batman on the brain at the moment, it's kind of like Batman. There are many different flavors of Batman, and each person has their own favorite kind. And, DC cater towards all those different people in the same way that Star Wars caters to everyone who has a different kind of favorite Star Wars story, I feel. And I don't necessarily think you need one singular creative to guide that. I think the thing they're doing with Johnson at the moment is quite clever in the sense that you have a trilogy guided by one man. Because I know, for better or for worse, you could argue that the sequel trilogy has been a little bit disjointed in terms of the different visionaries that they had tapped for that. Colin Trevorrow coming in, then getting axed off, and then Abrams coming back. So I definitely think maybe there's a point there to be had. Well, maybe we'll just need a streamlined one-person vision for something and see how that could last, sticking with that as a through line.
One of the original things back when like Lucas, when he very first did the very first film, he talked about it being a toy box that you could give to different creatives, and that was how he essentially saw the future of the whole franchise. It would be this set of rules and characters and whatever else that you'd give to different creatives and just see what spin they would put on it. So I like that idea, and like the legacy of it is to be put in all these different contexts and mediums and everything. So maybe its future is to just be used in as many different ways as possible. I like it. I like things. I like all the things.
It can work with different people, as we saw. Like one of the best, probably the best Star Wars film was directed by like Irvin Kershner, and he had a lot of influence in that. But we do have sort of the canon. There's always a few people that sort of like look after and make sure things happen. But what I say is, what Star Wars need to do and never deviate from is never do a separate timeline, or things have to. For me, it's going to have to be all within this one part, not one section of the galaxy, but it has to be within the one timeline. So I can look at that bit there, that bit there. Like if we ever just go, this is kind of a Star Wars film, but it's just in another. It's never going to. I can't have that sort of thing.
I do have a question though. Like, are there any kind of stories you don't want to see be told? Because I know there are all sorts of different things that people have.
Weapons destroying planets?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't need another one of them.
Yeah, but like, there are certain questions that I feel go better unanswered, and I think to me that's probably the creation of the Sith and the creation of the Jedi. I don't need to go that far.
Stop defining the Force from now on. Like, I think we know enough about the Force, and I think like it's good to keep it like we just know as much as we do. Like,
it's a magical energy. It binds the galaxy together.
We almost got a bit too far with midichlorians, and then we almost went too much into it again, like Last Jedi, trying to go into.
I thought Jedi did a really good. It restored the mysticism around it, because you had that weird sort of scientific explanation in Episode 1, but then the way that Luke talks about it in Jedi is that it is this big, unconquerable, impossible thing, and to even try and pin that down is vanity. I quite like that recontextualization of it.
Protect those sacred texts.
Yes, that's a potential qualm. Is how much do they delve into what was originally in the Jinn of the Will stuff? In the original
that's
text.
The thing. Is like I thought the stuff that we got from Rogue One when they opened up Chirrut Imwe as a character, Donnie Yen's character, I thought that would be. I love the idea of exploring different aspects of the Force. I think the Jedi Sith binary is interesting, but I definitely want to see. I think what's in Last Jedi alluded to in its closing shot when you have the
little broom kid,
kind of gripping hold of the broom. I like the idea of looking into that, and the idea that the Force is open to everyone as long as you open yourself up to it, rather than wall yourself away. It's one of those things where I look at and with terms of like Star Wars films that we've seen in the past, and the way that different expanded universe stories have really expanded on the actual original trilogy. There was a Dark Horse series that came out ages ago that was set ages and ages into the future after the events of Return of the Jedi. And I think it was Star Wars Legacy, I think it was. Someone actually did an article about this week.
Right.
And it was a very, very, I thought it had some really interesting ideas, but they made the mistake of grounding the character as a Skywalker. And the whole thing was that it was like set hundreds of years in the future, and you had the Jedi were all extinct, but the Sith were coming back. And I felt as though if you're going to do such a story set that far in the future,
do something
I
brand
think
new.
you need to do something that's not just going to rehash the same conflicts over again. We need something new, and that's why I'm personally between the Johnson stuff and the cancelled DB Weiss and Benioff trilogy, is I'm really excited for the Disney Plus shows. Is that I think Mandalorian is really cool, and like you said earlier on, reappraising familiar context that we're already familiar with, but at the same time that is still set within the Skywalker saga.
The production values as well on the Disney ones, like the Disney Plus stuff, like it feels like they're almost doing like movie sequels as TV shows, which is the thing that the MCU is doing as well. Like the amount of money being put into them, it's almost like a medium shift. It's sort of like this is how we're taking them forward. But everyone's going to watch a new episode of those shows every week. That's maybe the way that they're just going to deliver these stories overall.
It's really funny because as long as it feels like we've been alive since Revenge of the Sith has been gone and finished, we've always had the rumor of a Boba Fett film or a Boba Fett TV show. And you can go all the way back to that and hear interviews or read interviews from George Lucas saying, yes, I'd like to do that, but I can't fit like a way to get it cost effective.
Right.
And I feel like now we're in this time where they actually are.
Everything goes.
What was it, Star Wars Underworld that he wanted to do as the TV
Yeah,
show?
he wanted to do like one single episode on certain characters. Like I think even Dengar was going to get an episode.
Get in,
I mean,
Dengar.
to be fair, he can have a dirt nap anytime he wants. But it's exciting now because I really do want to see some of these characters explored, but I also want new characters, as we say.
Yeah.
Like
I mean, it's weird because because I grew up playing all Star Wars video games more than I rewatched the movies over and over again. They were always there, but I was spending more time in Jedi Power Battles or Battlefront or whatever. So like for me, Star Wars has always been that sort of wider fiction, that wider lore. And I don't. It's strange because maybe it's just an obvious question, but like I don't associate Star Wars with Skywalkers as much as I maybe should. I just don't.
I think that's me as well, and that's always like. I think that's why I love Rogue One so much, and I kind of really like Solo in a way. Like, even though that should be more of like a not.
If I was just a
it should be a
Star Wars
series, it should be something like a 3-part series or something like that. But I feel like those more side stories that we're so used to in games, and books,
Like
I would clarify though that even though those games didn't necessarily revolve around Skywalkers, I would still classify them as being a part of the Skywalker saga because it's still those eras that we're familiar with. And I think when Disney means that it's the end of the Skywalker saga, I think they genuinely mean they're taking a clean break from what we've seen with like the Clone Wars, with the Galactic Civil War, and then also what we see in the sequel trilogy. I don't necessarily think they'll be striving for a new aesthetic, but I definitely think it's going to be something unconventional and not necessarily something we're familiar with. While at the same time, intermingling it with stuff that we are more familiar with, like we're seeing in the Obi-Wan show and the Mandalorian show. So
I think they'd have to give it like a big old chunk of time, maybe focus on, like I said, like a handful of different stories across a whole bunch of different timelines, and then maybe in 10 years of our time later, they go, by the way, this person's actually descended from Skywalker, and you bring it back then, and it's not as like obvious kind of thing, because there was all the stuff with Rey's parents. Oh my God, is she going to be a Skywalker descendant or whatever? And it's a bit played out at this point.
It feels like we're mainly getting away from super weapons, guys in white armor, and everyone knows everyone, because this galaxy is so big, but yet it feels so small.
That's a good point. Yeah, a lot of Star Wars movies do tend to feel quite small because everyone's descended from everyone else.
Everyone knows everyone, and Lando's coming in and out of nowhere, which I'm not against, but we're just having everyone come back like
3PO was built by Vader.
3PO, like it all feels too connected. So I would like say where it feels like we have one central part, we've actually got like 3 or 4 that also revolve around that one central part, so that there's all ties back to everything else, but it's not clearly like rammed into each other.
Yeah, I mean, when Kathleen Kennedy actually spoke about what she wants to see from Star Wars going forward, and then this was in reference to the Johnson trilogy, the Kevin Feige film announcement, was that we're not looking at just another trilogy, we're really looking at the next 10 years or more. So that again, that sounds Marvel-y in a way almost.
Yeah,
you're looking at the way you're looking at it in a sense of a process of time rather than just trilogies, and that's interesting to me because when you look at Star Wars and you think the idea of so much of it is tied to what we know, the fact that they're looking at 10 years of stuff that isn't necessarily things we're familiar with, and the thing that I can't wrap my head around it is because I was very young when I played Knights of the Old Republic, is how you get a concept as good as that, as strong as that,
It
and you
is so much
blend
time.
that into what we see in the films because it's not been done before.
No, I mean the reason the Thrones landed so well is because you had such a massive build-up. Like you had, years. I mean, again, obviously entire seasons. Like like even the first sort of 4 seasons are very much the groundwork, and everything starts coming together way more after that. And it's like you needed that time, that investment, which you almost can't get, quote unquote, in a movie. But if you bring in the TV side of it again, if they did a Knights of the Old Republic TV show, that would make the most sense, and you could have a whole episode on character dynamics without even having to worry about the big set piece battles or whatever. Like you could lay the groundwork so much better in that way.
Even like what they're going to do with The Mandalorian, like giving a bounty hunter its own show is such a perfect idea that they just need to do. Like, and also Thrawn has come back in books.
Yes.
Like, I feel like at some point they not need to, but I would love to see Thrawn on the actual screen and speak and be menacing and terrifying rather than just the Clone Wars. Because we're kind of like, Rebels, we kind of just like left it at a standstill where we don't know what's happened to him.
Right.
And
is he still in canon? They didn't wipe him
They
out.
brought it back.
Oh yeah.
He's still alive. His fate is now sort of like a mystery to everyone. We actually don't know what's happened.
Because I always loved Prince Shizor as well, like the whole thing where he was actually in the room alongside Palpatine when the holograms were going on.
I would love to bring
plug that stuff in.
Place things from like even further than the outer rim, like the Chiss ascendancy into this. And I feel like there's a hint that they're going with Thrawn. They're doing 3 more books, but they're about his past, not his future.
Right.
So I feel like they're maybe leaving his future open for a series or a couple of like longer things that we might
That'd be
need to
great. Make it like a
discuss.
House of Cards type thing.
Yeah.
From the Empire. That'd be interesting.
I would take that. I think it's weird in terms of perception because we talked about like how much does the average cinema goer associate Star Wars with the Skywalkers or with this certain time period, and it's like, would that be seen as a creative risk if they did move away from it, or does the Star Wars IP just hold in itself?
I think that's the interesting thing. I do think Rise of Skywalker has a part to play in this in a way because so much of the discussion leading up into this film has not just been about what Star Wars will be like after it's gone, well, not the franchise, but after the Skywalker saga. But the fact that so much of the discussion surrounding it is about the regions beyond the uncharted regions of the galaxy, which I think is fascinating. It's not the outer rim. The outer rim's we already know about that.
Do we?
Yeah. The outer rim's all like Tatooine and and all that.
Further than that is where Snoke and all that went.
That's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
And the idea of exploring the galaxy, maybe we'll get like a Star Trek style thing where it's like the Star Wars equivalent of the Enterprise exploring the galaxy, trying to like
see that would totally work.
Yeah, but there's so many different things I think they could go with here, and like it's difficult again to really look at this and go, well, how do you take the magic of Star Wars, which we associate with being a story about good versus evil, about light versus dark, and about the Skywalkers and the Empire and the Rebels and the clones and the droids and the Sith and the Jedi. How do you take that and is there a danger of going, if you were to go into the future, I think you'd end up invalidating everything that came before. If you make it so epic like that Dark Horse comic did, where you go all that way into the future and you're like, oh, by the way, the Jedi are all gone again and the Sith are coming back and there's an Empire again. It just makes everything seem redundant.
It
so
means
maybe
that
you do have to expand out wide ways rather
it's
than
strange because
lateral ways.
the magic of Star Wars, like if we can distill it down, it's Luke Skywalker looking over to the desert and seeing the 2 moons, 2 stars. Like I feel like the magic came from there. And then when we kind of started again with the Phantom Menace, like it was kind of washed away a bit, but it was still sort of familiar. And that eventually built up to the point where now people hold that era to such an extent that they love it.
That's a very good point.
It's the magic is going to be gone with the next film after Rise of Skywalker. You can't have, you're not going to have John Williams' epic score.
I was once that cast's gone,
you know and love, because that's what it is. You see Han Solo going, Chewie, we're home. You get a tear down your eye. You're not going to get that in the next one, but I feel like it's going to eventually. We're basically rebuilding. We're building up,
crafting a new mythology,
but we're not forgetting. We're going to have all that behind us, and which can seep in, like we're seeing with Rise of Skywalker trailer. You get B1 battle during the side there. That's enough to be like, oh, this is still connected to that sort of thing, and we're still going to have like gonk droids going about or something like that. But I feel like it's. The magic is going to be lost. Like it's going to be lost.
Yeah.
But it'll be reforged in a new way and then recrafted.
Yeah, the thing that it doesn't need to do is what Terminator does. Like I liked Terminator, it's fine, but it's schlocky as hell.
Yeah.
But like it doesn't need a character saying a one line. Someone else doesn't need to drop in and say they're your father or whatever every couple of movies. Like
You don't need a 3PO there forever.
I want them to go.
I think you make a very interesting point there, Ben Roy, in the fact that I know I grew up on the prequels. I was 3 when the Phantom Menace came out, and Star Wars to me was always the original trilogy and the prequels. And I understood that they both had their own aesthetics, but when taken in the context that I had as approaching Star Wars as a kid and seeing them both as the same thing,
Yeah.
it made sense to me.
Yeah.
I imagine if you were a long-time fan of the franchise going into Episode 1 of The Phantom Menace and you see this slick, smooth Republic that's not the grimy, kind of burnt-out feel of the original trilogy, you probably would think, this isn't Star Wars.
There is like
what
a
is
weird...
this? And probably when we get a new trilogy that's going to, be the same thing or be a different thing completely, I think it'll probably be the same thing. Like you said, it's just difficult for me to appraise because coming from where I am as a Star Wars fan, where both things were kind of in tandem growing up, I never saw them as being different. Whereas now, when we have all of our cognitive faculties about us, we'll look at a new Star Wars film and that's not to do with any of the errors we know so far and go,
I think it's also interesting that like ditching the word episode as well. Like, I mean, a lot of the marketing was just Star Wars: The Force Awakens, Star Wars: The Last Jedi, and it's like you get away from the idea that to a casual audience that it is a continuation of something, and that frees you up to do infinitely more stories or you don't have to always think about the continuity. You can just break away from it and do a random one-off story or whatever. It's just weird because I think they'll end up doing both. I think they'll have their little like auteur stuff with Rian Johnson, or if they give like a new trilogy to a stand-in for whoever DB and Benioff get replaced by, you can do this authored stuff, but you can also just do a completely separate thing like Jedi Fallen Order that just comes out of nowhere and is a nice little contained story. And they can kind of do a bit of both.
It's like, imagine episode, like I think we will get 10, 11, 12, as you said. These central episodes are, like, I'm going to metaphor here, the lightsaber that extends through the galaxy and everything else around it grows from that. I think like
beam.
We should have these key episodes and everything sort of floats around with that. But I think the biggest mistake so far is what we're going to get with Mandalorian now, which is quite good, is we've not really seen like what happens after, like directly what happens after the Empire is gone or gone.
Battlefront 2 did a bit of it, but
yeah, but it's such a distilled point. Like if the Empire's End and that Aftermath trilogy is so perfect at just like painting the picture of a desolate galaxy. It just doesn't, it's not functioning because what happens when you rip out something that was controlling it for so long? There's a massive hole left there when we pulled out the roots. Sure, they're fixing it one by one, but there is still so much from like political drama to actual war that hasn't been explained yet.
And I think the interesting thing that we keep coming back to here is that we're still craving stories set within the context of what we would consider to be the Skywalker saga. We're still interested in seeing what comes out after, what happened in between the events of Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens. And obviously there is a place for that to be explored in the expanded canon. But my question is, do you want to see that explored in a more substantial way in a film or an anthology series?
I think something like the Aftermath trilogy should be put to screen or something along those lines. Like instead of just talking about the Battle of Jakku in the background, like this epic thing that was the end of the Empire, and hearing all the stories, because not a lot of people know like sort of how the Operation Cinder and Palpatine set up the fall of the Empire to be reborn as the Force Awakens. If there's the Force Awakens as the First Order, we might find this out from himself in this new film. But there's so much like mystical plans that we've not heard of him. And also, I feel like the end of the Skywalker saga is always going to see that the end of him, because I think he's also integral as much as a Skywalker, because he's pretty much, if we buy into the thing that the Immaculate Conception of Anakin and then taking over him and trying to get Luke and now returning, he's kind of like the one dark thread for it all, as we have the good
that's the one thing they've got left to bring it all together.
End it on one question, and that is kind of going into your thing that you want to see the Battle of Jakku. We kind of saw that in Battlefront 2, but other stuff that you don't necessarily see answered. Are there any things that you guys don't want to know, like in terms of the mysteries of the galaxy? Is there anything that you're not necessarily sure you want to see going forward in terms of Star Wars' future?
It would be the origin of the Force. If they ever did something where they drilled all the way down to some individual person who invented the Force, like anything that goes back down into that sort of
Jonathan E. Force.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Mr. Force, just sort of Frederick Force doing his thing back, the kind of episode 1 style.
It's actually just John Williams on his own.
If you give it to him, that's totally fine. But yeah, if they did something that was more in the line of episode 1, to be honest, I didn't hate the midichlorian thing. I just thought that was the nearest human measurement of what the Force really was, which is what it was always, this mythical thing. I think if they drill down on the elements that are inherently mystical, you'll lose a lot of the magic. So for me, it would be that I don't need origin stories. I want full canon stuff, going forward stuff. Yes.
For me, I think it's just the same. I want the Force to remain some sort of magical thing, and also just never to see some sort of super thing destroying planets again. Although I feel like something like the Valley of the Jedi could help with a lot of that.
Here we go. You got the Valley of the
drop the Valley of the Jedi.
If we had something like that, maybe, and sort of, that would bridge enough gaps that people would just stop asking these questions.
Well, he said the Jedi Knight game, so now we need to wrap it up unless he keeps on going for the end of time. So yeah, please let us know what you all think of Star Wars' future down in the comments below. Are you excited about the idea of Star Wars away from the Skywalkers, or does it leave you feeling full of fear and then anger and hatred and then suffering? Because that's the order it invariably goes in. You can follow Scott on Twitter at
I'm at /LP89.
You can follow Ben Roy on Twitter
at Ben Roy Turner.
You can follow me at Ewan Runes Things. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And head back on over to whatculture.com where you can find more news, lists, and articles like this every day. Until next time, though, may the Force be with you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bring back Kyle Katarn.